Hello, folks, and welcome back to this week's edition of Shakespeare Trivia. I'm your host, Michaud, and I'm pleased to announce that we have a special guest this week coming to show off his skills. He claims to know everything about Shakespeare and all of his plays, so it's going to be fun to be able to meet him and see what kind of geniusness he brings to the table here. And he's from Europe. He's from across the world. Made the trek over here to go ahead and show us what he's got. So without further ado, let's give him a hand and meet this guy. What the? William Shakespeare, born on an unknown date in April of 1564, was an English playwright and poet. Shakespeare was raised in Stratford-upon-Avon, England. At the age of 18, Shakespeare, or the Bard of Avon, as he was sometimes called, was united in marriage to Anne Hathaway. Together they had one child, along with a set of twins, making for 3 children total. Sometime in his early to mid-20s, Shakespeare began his career in London, England. Between 1589 and 1613, Shakespeare produced most of his famous work. In his early career, Shakespeare's plays were performed by a group and company called Lord Chamberlain's Men. However, following Queen Elizabeth's death in 1603, the company was renamed the King's Men. Soon after that, the group began to perform Shakespeare's plays in a theater named the Globe. The Bard of Avon even enjoyed making some guest appearances in his own plays. Throughout his professional career, Shakespeare moved around England, finding numerous places to settle. In only about 23 years, he managed to complete 38 plays and 5 poems. One interesting fact about William Shakespeare is that in a way, Shakespeare lived a double life. In London, he was well known for his playwriting skills. However, in his hometown of Stratford, he was locally recognized as an affluent businessman. A few years before his death, Shakespeare retired to Stratford and died in 1616 at the age of 52. The Comedy of Errors is commonly categorized as one of Shakespeare's oldest pieces. It is, in fact, his shortest recorded play at just 16,258 words. The play can pretty much be read in one sitting. It is filled with eventful content and is not as difficult to read as some of Shakespeare's other works. It is believed that The Comedy of Errors was a big hit on stage as well. The first showing was on December 28, 1594, during the Elizabethan era. During this time, performances were in high demand. The actual play is set in present-day Turkey, which was a busy trading post in ancient times. If you don't know where this is, we have Gopi. Shakespeare was heavily influenced by Plautus in his infamous story Menaechmi. The plots in both pieces are extremely similar. Both stories include a set of twins who know their other twin exists, but they don't know exactly where. After a lot of coincidences and luck, the set of twins unknowingly end up in the same town. What takes place after is a series of misunderstandings because of the confusion with the identities. The Comedy of Errors has been remade into movies, on-stage performances, and musicals. In order to fully comprehend and understand the Comedy of Errors, one must first know the wide range of characters that the play focuses on. One set of characters is Antipholus of Syracuse and Antipholus of Ephesus. This set of twins was separated in a horrifying shipwreck when they were babies. The play is set in Ephesus, where Antipholus of Ephesus resides. Antipholus of Syracuse is searching the world in hopes of finding his long-lost brother. After years of restless wandering, Antipholus of Syracuse has become anxious and is ready to give up. His twin brother, Antipholus of Ephesus, is a merchant in his town who does very well for himself. He is nicely settled in his large home and is relatively happy. He is happily married to a woman named Adriana. Adriana is an extremely jealous wife and is always suspicious of her husband's actions. She also has a sister, Luciana. Luciana is unmarried and encourages her sister and others to have patience and respect when they're dealing with relationships. The last set of major characters is Dromio of Syracuse and Dromio of Ephesus. This second set of identical twins was separated at birth, similar to the Antipholus twins. Dromio of Syracuse and Dromio of Ephesus are servants to Antipholus of Syracuse and Antipholus of Ephesus. Both Dromios know their place and are oftentimes harassed or treated poorly by their masters. The play begins by explaining how the sets of twins were separated. Antipholus of Syracuse and Antipholus of Ephesus have parents named Abes and Aegeon. Abes gives birth to the twins the same day the other set of twins are born, Dromio of Syracuse and Dromio of Ephesus. Aegeon takes these sets of twins in hopes that they will one day become servants to his own sons. The parents and two sets of twins board a boat and set sail. A violent storm hits the ship and separates the family. Aegeon and Dromio of Syracuse and Antipholus of Syracuse drift off and land in, you probably guessed it, Syracuse. Abes and the other two boys end up in Ephesus. With no way of communication, the separated family has no clue where the other half of their family is. After years of searching, Aegeon finds himself in Ephesus. However, he is put on death row for coming into Ephesus. This is because Ephesus and Syracuse, where he came from, are at a disagreement at the time. At the same time, Antipholus of Syracuse and Dromio of Syracuse arrive at Ephesus. As you may have expected, a lot of confusing events happen, with two sets of identical twins in the same town. My performance will show a scene where a merchant, Angelo, and Antipholus of Ephesus have an argument. Antipholus of Ephesus orders a necklace for his wife. Angelo, mistaking his identity, gives the necklace to Antipholus of Syracuse, who is very confused. He tells Angelo that he will pay for it later. The next day, Antipholus of Ephesus, the buyer of the necklace, says that he never got the necklace. The confusion and anger continue until the scene that I am about to perform. Today, I will be performing Act 4, Scene 1.
A man is well holp up to trust you. I promised your presents and the chain, but neither chain nor goldsmith came to me. Save your merry humor. Here's the note. How much the chain weighs to the utmost carat, the finest of the gold, and the chargeful fashion. I am not furnished with the present money. Besides, I have some business in the town. With you take the chain, and bid my wife disperse the sum on the receipt thereof. Perchance I will be there as soon as you. Then you will bring the chain to her yourself. No, bear it with you, lest I come not time enough. Well, sir, I will. Have you the chain about you? And if I have not, sir, I hope you have, or else you may return without your money. Nay, come, sir, I pray you, give me the chain. Good Lord, you use this dalliance to excuse your breach of promise to the porpentine. Antipholus, the chain. Why, give it to my wife, and fetch your money. Come, come, you know I gave it you even now. Either send the chain, or send me by some token. Fie, now you run this humor out of breath. Come, where's the chain? I pray you, let me see it. Give the money that you owe me for the chain. I owe you none until I receive the chain. Oh, Antipholus, you know I gave it you half an hour since. You gave me none, and you wrong me much to say so. You wrong me more, sir, by denying it. Consider how it stands upon my credit. This touches me in reputation. Either consent to pay this sum for me, or I attach you by an officer. Consent to pay thee that I never had? Arrest me, foolish fellow, if you darest. Here is thy fee. Arrest him, officer.
After the section I just performed, there are more mix-ups because of the mistaken identities. One of the mix-ups involves Antipholus of Ephesus' sister-in-law, Luciana. Antipholus of Syracuse has the hots for Luciana. However, Luciana believes that it is her sister's husband who is hitting on her. Luciana dismisses Antipholus of Syracuse and tells her sister the whole story about how her husband must be going mad. When Antipholus of Ephesus is arrested in my scene, his wife, Adriana, must pay the bail. She gives the money to Dromio of Syracuse, who runs the cash to Antipholus of Syracuse, who is not arrested or in need of money. He and Dromio of Syracuse start to become skeptical of this new town of Ephesus. They think that it is cursed or somehow put under a spell. Fortunately, both sets of twins and the parents all end up in a priory, similar to a church, together. After a few classic "oh" and "now that makes sense" moments, the story closes out in a happily ever after fashion. The short section that I performed was influential to the rest of the play because it is a perfect example of mistaken identities. It helps to set up more of these mix-ups in the rest of the play. In that comedy of errors, there are a lot of themes. One of the themes that shows up a lot in Shakespeare's plays is family. It is evident that family means a lot to the characters, especially Aegeon and Antipholus of Syracuse. Another theme of the play is that of mistaken identity. This theme is pretty obvious, as it is used throughout the Comedy of Errors. There are numerous occurrences where one character is thought to be another. The final theme is right in the title of the play, comedy. The play thrives on humor and class-up mix-ups that are very entertaining. Although some of these situations are awkward, Shakespeare does his best to make them as amusing as possible. Harold Bloom, author of Shakespeare, The Invention of Human, gives an expert review and evaluation of the play. He says, "The shortest and most unified of all of Shakespeare's plays, The Comedy of Errors is regarded by many scholars as his very first, which I tend to doubt. It shows such skill, indeed mastery, in action, incipient character, and stagecraft, that it far outshines the 3 Henry VI plays, and the rather lame comedy The Two Gentlemen of Verona. It is true that in comedy Shakespeare was free to be himself from the start, whereas the shadow of Marlowe darkens the early histories, Richard III included, and Titus Andronicus. Yet, even granted Shakespeare's comic genius, the Comedy of Errors does not read or play like apprentice work. It is a remarkably sophisticated elaboration of, and improvement upon, Plautus, the Roman comic dramatist who most of our playgoers know through the musical adaptation A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. Shakespeare himself was adapted splendidly by Rogers and Hart, whose The Boys from Syracuse took the Comedy of Errors as their source, much as Cole Porter later was to utilize The Taming of the Shrew for his Kiss Me Kate. My personal reaction to the Comedy of Errors, I liked it. It was shorter than most Shakespeare plays that we've read in the past. It kept me more entertained because of that. It was more simple to read, just the language was not as confusing as it has been in the past. It was also nice to read a comedy as opposed to a tragedy like Macbeth and Romeo and Juliet. It was refreshing, really, to see that Shakespeare actually is kind of funny. Sometimes hard to believe, but yes, it's true. And it was nice to, have exposure to that comedy, unlike what we've seen before. And all in all, I'd rate it a pretty good play, and actually recommend it to anyone that's looking for some Shakespeare to read.